How many of you are attending Dev Summit for the first time? Okay, a few of you. That's cool. Well, welcome. If you haven't already, Melanie and I strongly encourage you to sign up for the dodgeball tournament. Have you heard of this? So on Thursday night is the big party, and there's a dodgeball tournament. And so you meet, number one, you meet other users and business partners and developers. Number two, there's no all Esri staff team, so that's good. You have a good chance to meet Esri staffers, and then you get to play dodgeball, and the team that wins, you know what they win? A free pass to Esri Dev Summit next year. So that might be worth your while. So you may want to, it's also fun, and you get to make fun of people when they get hit and stuff like that, so that's something to be aware of on Thursday. There's also, I've never been to the Thursday night party, have you?
I have not.
Okay, so, but there's also like obviously food and beverages and stuff like that. So, but I strongly encourage you guys to sign up for the dodgeball tournament. We were going to give just a few more minutes for people to come in case they finish lunch. Also, another reminder, Jim mentioned this morning, is if you have questions to ask, right? You are here at Dev Summit. There are over 300 people from the development staff who are here, and they're in the showcase. What conference attendees typically do, however, is they go to the tech sessions and then they wait for the last day to go to the showcase to ask their questions. And that's fine, but be aware that the showcase actually closes on Friday. So you want to make sure you get into the showcase to ask your questions on the Thursday. All right, just heads up on that. Because once Thursday, I believe it's 4:30 or 4 o'clock rolls around, they shut it down and we start tearing down the booths. So you might want to make a memo to yourself, okay? And then some of the sessions on Friday, there's a couple of road ahead, I believe, but they are normally like repeated sessions. So if you're afraid you're going to miss a session earlier in the week, it might be repeated on Friday. I would strongly encourage you to get the Esri Events app if you don't have it on your mobile device or smartphone now, and you can check for the agenda and stuff like that. All right? Okay. We doing okay? Mellow from this morning? Lots of info?
Is it post-lunch nap time?
I don't know. It's a tough crowd. It's very... Okay. How many of you are sharing right now? Like publishing stuff, right? Okay, that's cool. So how many of you are publishing from ArcMap? A few of you, okay. How many of you are publishing or sharing from ArcGIS Pro? Okay, fewer hands. Okay, good. You're in the right session because we're going to focus on sharing from ArcGIS Pro. Now, so you should be here for sharing web layers and services in the ArcGIS platform, right? My name is Derek Law, and I work in the product management team. With me is Melanie Summers. She's a product engineer on the, I want to say sharing team?
I'm on the sharing team.
Sharing team?
That is correct.
So thank you guys for joining us. And Melanie says she's not on social media, but I'm on Twitter, so just joined recently. If you want to get some info, you're welcome to follow.
You're far more savvy than I am.
I try. So has anyone seen me present a technical session before? Oh, okay, a couple of you. It's good. So if you've seen me present a technical session before at UC or Dev Summit previously, I always kind of like to warm up the crowd, get them all into it, and I tell a couple of jokes, right? And it's very hard because it's tough to come up with new jokes that are politically correct and people are happy and no one's angry and gets upset and stuff. So what I want to start with is, how many of you are developers? Right, a few of you, okay. I am sure you're familiar with the O'Reilly book series. They typically have a white cover and they have a picture of a little baby panda or a tiger or a baby seal or something, and it's like learn JavaScript. Everyone with me so far? Or learn HTML5, right? So far so good. This is a tough crowd. They're either really tired or still digesting. So have you seen the latest wave of books from O'Reilly? Targeted at IT and development staff. It's a fantastic new series. I'm going to show you the new titles of the new wave of these O'Reilly book covers. Everyone with me so far? Okay. Again, they always have some unique animal. So for example, latest edition, trying stuff out until it works, right? Okay, no one's laughing. Let's look at another one. This one I personally do quite a bit. Never with Esri technology, but if I'm using some third-party software, right, I need to find out, hey, what's going on? How do I Google that error message? You can't see the pictures there, Melanie.
I don't get to see the pictures.
Okay.
I haven't seen these jokes. It's really not fair that these columns are in my way.
Another one that very popular. Sometimes I am guilty of providing these type of solutions on GeoNet. Is if you try something and it doesn't work, so you use a temporary workaround. Right? Yes, it'll get the job done, not quite as built. Okay, there's another one here. This is really more. This version is more geared towards those of you who work directly with customers. Right? You get the list of requirements and they want to build some kind of UI or app or some front end. You build to their spec and then you do the presentation and then they're not happy, right? So you have to maybe rewrite the web app front end every 6 weeks, but they still want it done under budget and on time, right? Okay. We have another one here. You know, I personally use the Esri community GeoNet, very popular, but we recognize that there are other discussion forum places to go to. For example, Stack Overflow, when you want to find an answer and you want to copy paste an answer, right? And then of course, we have one more. This is probably going to be the one that I buy first. I know a lot of our developers are looking forward to this edition, right? Something goes wrong, you want to blame the user. Okay? All right, and with that, we have 107. Why don't we get started? So again, thank you guys for showing up. You should be here to learn about sharing content to the ArcGIS platform. My name is Derek, and with me is Melanie. We'll be talking the next hour about basically sharing workflows to the ArcGIS platform. Okay? So what do we mean by that? What are we going to cover over the next hour? Here's a rough breakdown of our agenda, right? We'll briefly recap the ArcGIS platform. Sud Menon, our director of software products, did a great job talking at a high level. We just want to recap to make sure everyone in this room understands a couple of key concepts in the context of sharing. So when we do our demos and we say you can share some content somewhere, you understand where it's going. So a little bit of architecture. Then we'll proceed to focus on using ArcGIS Pro to share your content to the ArcGIS platform. And I did a survey earlier. I think 2 or 3 of you were using ArcGIS Pro. Many of you have used ArcMap. Well, this session is going to focus on ArcGIS Pro because, as Jim McKinney said earlier today, that is the next generation of ArcGIS Desktop, if you will. It is the future. If you haven't used ArcGIS Pro, now is the time to get on board. It's had several releases over the last couple of years. The team is working very hard to enable more and more capabilities inside ArcGIS Pro. So we'll talk about the sharing user experience and workflows that you should be aware of. We'll also talk about more specifically how you share web layers and web maps. And then we'll have some demos, and then near the end, we'll talk about sharing 3D content, web tools, so the classic sharing of geoprocessing functionality, and also locators. And if you have questions, Melanie and I will be here to answer questions at any near the end of the session. If you have a question during the session, put your hand up and we'll try to answer it at the appropriate time. Or if it's too long, we'll kind of, park it and we'll come back to it at the end of our session, all right? So I'm sure you've all seen this slide or a variation of it, right? This is the classic ArcGIS platform or WebGIS pattern slide. You realize that at the very top, we have client applications. They could be desktop apps, they could be web apps, or they could be apps on smartphones or tablets. They search and discover and find GIS assets when they connect to a portal, lowercase p, right? A portal could be ArcGIS Online, or it could be the portal for ArcGIS component of ArcGIS Enterprise, formerly called ArcGIS Server. And a portal is your central one-stop destination of all your assets and resources, powered by GIS servers, and it's really only useful if it has content and data to look at, basically. Now you can have this ArcGIS Online deployment either in the cloud, by using ArcGIS Online, or in your own infrastructure using ArcGIS Enterprise. So the whole idea of this session is, how do you take your content that you create in ArcGIS Pro and you share it to the larger portal? Again, that lowercase p, this idea of this central destination point within your organization where members of your organization can find, search, and use your GIS data and then make mashups, like make a web map or make a web scene, right? And again, when we use the term portal, we use lowercase p, we mean ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS. Now, what makes this portal concept significant, of course, is this idea of the geoinformation model. Sud earlier today had a slide that showed you your portal can have lots of different content inside it. For example, you have web layers, that abstraction of your web service, right? Many different types. We have feature layers, map layers, tile layers, and by mashing up or collecting these different layer types, we can save it as a web map, which is for 2D data, or a web scene, which is for 3D content, right? And all of this type of content, this geoinformation model, lives inside your portal. And just to make sure we're all on the same page here, I'm just going to jump out really quickly. You can see here I'm in Firefox and I'm looking at my ArcGIS Online organization. It is a portal, lowercase p, a central destination point. And if I go to my content page, you can see here I have many different items. All of these different items, some of them live inside my portal, some of them may be pointers or references to web services. The point is, in our session here, we want to take perhaps our data in an enterprise geodatabase or data locally that we're working with in ArcGIS Pro, and we want to share it to this portal. So let me go back to slides. Okay. So again, portal is significant because it has this geoinformation model. This is the direction that the ArcGIS platform is going to. We want to talk about how we can take our content and share it to this portal. Now, as I mentioned previously, your ArcGIS platform can be deployed in one of two ways. The most obvious one is ArcGIS Online. Everything is in the cloud. Life is good. Esri takes care of all the management, logistics, and overhead. All I have to do as an end user is connect to it, share my data. That's it. I don't worry about that. However, we have another option where if you decide to deploy the WebGIS pattern in your own infrastructure, you would use ArcGIS Enterprise. And as you saw this morning, the 10.5 release has a lot of great new functionality. Now, ArcGIS Enterprise is, think of it like an umbrella term. And it's actually composed of a bunch of different components or pieces. So if you decide to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise, you'll need to install Portal for ArcGIS with a capital P. You'll need to install ArcGIS Server. You will also need to install the ArcGIS Data Store. All of these three components are separate installations. They are configured to work together in what we call a hosting server, and this will allow you to have WebGIS in your own infrastructure, so on your own physical machines or in your own private cloud. We bring this to your attention because if you are the ArcGIS Enterprise Administrator and you're setting up sharing for your end users, we want you to be aware of where things go as we proceed through this session. Okay. Now, just to quickly mention ArcGIS Pro, Jim did a fantastic job today talking about it, right? It is the next generation app of ArcGIS Desktop. It's included with ArcGIS Desktop. It has been purposely designed to be the premier client for WebGIS, the premier client to take your content and share it to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And with each release, the team works very hard to enable more functionality. Now, when I use ArcGIS Pro, when I connect to my portal, it leverages the portal's organizational settings, right? So if I have base map set up, well, it uses the base map gallery. If I happen to have a utility service, such as a custom locator for geocoding, or a custom elevation service, well, it can leverage those capabilities too. And we have this dialog window, the screenshot of ArcGIS Pro, where I can enable these settings. Let's take a quick look and a quick demo of sharing in ArcGIS Pro. So right now on my machine, you can see we have ArcGIS Pro, right? How many of you are using it today? I said 2 or 3 of you, right? So just a quick nickel tour. Key difference, of course, between ArcGIS Pro and ArcMap is it has a new ribbon-like interface. Notice as I click on each one of these headings, the ribbon changes for functionality related to that heading. This is designed, of course, to make the user experience a lot more nicer and to make it less complex, even though we have so much functionality in this app. You'll notice we have the familiar table of contents tab on the left, but I can also view like my list by drawing order, my list by data sources, also list by selection. I can actually have what's called a project in ArcGIS Pro. So unlike ArcMap, which uses a map document, ArcGIS Pro has a project, and I can actually have more than one map window within my project, so I can display different content. And then on the far right, notice we have our project window, again, where I can access different content within my project. Now, I'm not here to talk about ArcGIS Pro in detail. I want to talk about sharing. So what I can do here is I can share data, right? So notice when I hit the Share tab, I have a bunch of different options. I can choose to share the entire contents of my map frame, so the web map, or I could share one layer if I want to, a layer. So maybe I'll select the capitals layer, and if I hit Web Layer, which I already have done, I have this Share as Web Layer dialog on the far right. And here is where I can start to configure some parameters. For example, let me scroll up. I'll give it a name, so I'll call it capitals. I can decide whether or not I want to reference that data or copy it. We will talk about those details in a bit more, in more detail later on. Do I want to make it a feature service or just a map image service? I'll add my summary and my tags. And because I've connected to my portal, in this case, notice I've connected to my portal on my machine with the capital P. I can also decide if I want to share it with everyone or certain groups in my portal, but I'll leave the default to everyone. And one more thing, before I actually hit the share button, I want to highlight the fact that in ArcGIS Pro, if I look in the upper right-hand corner, notice it tells me I am currently connected to my Portal 10.5 installation, which is actually on my machine. But what I could do is go to my project pane, go to portals, and you'll see here, I could easily connect to my ArcGIS Online organization or my portal. I have a bunch that I can connect to, right? Again, ArcGIS Pro has been designed to be the premier client for the WebGIS pattern. Let me go back to my UI. And just like previously in ArcMap, we hit the Analyze button, right? The software is going to go through, look at my data to make sure I've done everything I can to optimize it before I share it. I have a couple of warnings. It says here my data source is not registered. We'll talk a bit about that later on. And my base map layer is not supported. That's okay. Hit publish, and it's going to ignore my base map. And it's going to publish that content now, right? And you'll see it in Portal. So while it's working here, I'll quickly change dialogues, go to my other tab for my 10.5 portal in my machine and go to my content. And hopefully it'll publish in a few minutes or a minute or two. Still working here. So it's uploading that service definition and you will see it appear here. Now I'm not going to wait because let's give another minute. Still going here. You're welcome to put on the feedback form, Derek needs a faster machine. That always helps. You know, I don't have a nice slimline book like Melanie. So while it's doing that, we will move on, and I'm going to pass it to Melanie.
Okay. So Derek just showed us exactly what am I doing?
You're good.
Yay. Okay, it worked, and you guys can hear me, right? Beautiful. I'm assuming the silence means yes. So Derek just showed us what it looks like to share from ArcGIS Pro. And no matter what content you're sharing, you're going to have a very similar sharing experience from Pro. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you're signed into your portal. Because you can be connected to multiple portals, so I can be connected to ArcGIS.com. If I do have access to multiple portals from different organizations, I could be connected to all of those at once. So make sure that it's the correct one that you're looking for. And then you can choose to either share from the sharing ribbon to share your entire map as either a web map or a web layer, or you could go to the contents pane and select either multiple layers or a single layer and share just that out as a web layer. So depending on what you're looking for, you'll do it from different locations. But from either of those, that's going to launch the sharing pane. From the sharing pane, you're going to choose exactly what you want to share, how you want to share it, change any configurations. You'll analyze your data for any potential issues, and then you'll click the publish or share button depending on the content. So, really? Did you go to 4 or 3? Man, you guys missed some really great animation. That's okay. Okay, thank you for letting me know. I greatly appreciate that. So, sign into a portal, and then you can share from either the ribbon to share your entire map, the context menu to either share a single layer or a selection, analyze, and then publish or share. So when we're sharing from Pro, as Derek said, that can either be to ArcGIS Online, where we're going to package up all of your data, upload that to ArcGIS Online, and create whatever web content is necessary. When we're sharing to ArcGIS Enterprise, it's really a twofold process. So we're going to publish whatever web services are necessary to your ArcGIS server, and we're going to create a portal item in your portal. So when you're sharing to ArcGIS Enterprise, it's that twofold piece that comes into play, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the session, because sharing to ArcGIS Online is a very simple process of just packaging everything up and uploading it. Now, you are probably wondering at this point why we keep talking about layers and maps, because my guess here is most of you have been sharing from ArcMap, which means that you're used to sharing services directly to a server. And one of the reasons why is as we keep adding functionality to Pro, so as we add new Symbology, as we add new layer types and things, a lot of that we can't push to the service level. We have to store that at the portal item. So that's one of the reasons why. The second reason is your end users, the people who are actually consuming this data, more and more they're going to be consuming the actual portal item and not the service directly. So we're storing a lot more configurations and settings at the layer item as opposed to the service, and the layer and map is what users are actually going to be interacting with. So your web service, as you guys know, it just exposes a URL for web clients to access your data, and that data can be either copied or referenced from a shared location or enterprise geodatabase. Now that service is exposed as a web layer, and that web layer is just a portal content item that's exposing your service that you can really store a lot of configurations and properties. So if you have advanced symbology like a heat map, a service isn't going to necessarily support it, but the web layer will. Now your web map, whether it's 2D or 3D, a map or a scene, is a collection of those web layers and mapping functionality that you can then share out as an application or embed in a website, however you end up using it. So just to reiterate, your service is going to be stored within your ArcGIS server. Your web layer and web map are those portal items that are exposing that content that end users are actually interacting with. Derek, you want to explain to us which servers we can actually share to?
Sorry. All right, so on this slide here, let me just step down. We want to cover this idea of federated servers. How many of you are familiar with the concept of federated servers? Okay, a few of you. If you are an ArcGIS server site administrator or you've worked with Portal for ArcGIS, then this concept will be a bit of a review. But for those of you who are not, we want to introduce this concept to you. So at 10.5, ArcGIS for Server got renamed or rebranded to ArcGIS Enterprise. But it's not just a simple renaming. The reason why we called it ArcGIS Enterprise is because now when you install the WebGIS pattern in your own infrastructure, we're promoting this idea of the ArcGIS enterprise-based deployment. What does that mean? Well, just like you saw previously, we have these three pieces, right? We install Portal for ArcGIS with a capital P. We install classic ArcGIS Server, and we also install the ArcGIS Data Store. Having these three pieces allows you to deploy a hosting server. And as Melanie said, when I share content from ArcGIS Pro to my portal, capital P, I am creating a new web layer inside Portal, but I'm also creating a new GIS service inside ArcGIS Server. And if I choose the copy data option, that data gets copied into the ArcGIS Data Store. Now, what makes this deployment a hosting server is the fact that server site A needs to be federated with Portal. What does that mean? That means when I configure my server site A, I tell it to defer its authentication and security model to Portal. And many organizations will probably have this base deployment where they set up Portal for ArcGIS, ArcGIS Server, and the ArcGIS Data Store. And that's great. Can you advance the next slide? However, if you work for a medium to large organization, maybe you have one portal set up, your central destination point, but you might have another department or another maybe regional office within your organization, and they have their own server site B. But they also want to share their content or contribute or collaborate content to the portal. Well, you might take your second server site B and also federate that with your Portal for ArcGIS installation. Again, you're telling server site B to delegate its security and authentication to the portal. And we bring this to your attention because when you share content from ArcGIS Pro, you have a choice on where you generate that service. Where do you want to create it, in server site A or server site B? And we'll look into that as we talk about data stores.
Okay, so when we're talking about web layers and web services, you're probably used to what you're going to end up seeing on the column on the right-hand side. But what you're actually interacting with through the Portal UI and when you're sharing from Pro are the web layers specifically. So to make sure that we are all on the same page with what those actually mean, we're just going to go over common web layers and which services they correspond to. So the first one, and I find this one really trips people up quite a bit, is map image layer. So a map image layer is just the portal item that is exposing a dynamic or a cached map service. So you're probably used to sharing map services from ArcMap. If you added that service as an item in your portal, or if you share from Pro, you're going to end up with a map image layer. Feature layer corresponds to a feature service. Tile layer corresponds to a cached map service, specifically a hosted layer, so your tiles are copied up. Vector tile layer, vector tile service, and scene layer is a cached scene service. So now that we're all on the same page with specifically what those layers correspond to, let's take a look at a few of those web layers and how we share them from Pro. So in Pro, I did this backwards. We're going to go over, I will show you how to share other layer types, but first I'm going to go over one of the really nice things about web layers specifically. So here I am consuming the service that Derek had shared out earlier. They're the same capital cities as before. Now, one of the nice things about web layers is that you can have multiple web layers that point to the same service. Now, those web layers can have different configurations, different parameters set up, so that you basically get to interact and store different settings, but you're using the same service. So you don't have to republish your data every time. So I have that same web layer in my web map. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. So it creates a new layer in my map. I'm going to go ahead and create labels. Now, this is a feature layer, so it doesn't support labels at the service level, but because the web layer can store that setting for me, it's able to. I'll go ahead and rename this. And then I'm going to save this new layer item. So by clicking Save Layer, it's going to pull in that same information as from my initial layer. I'll create that item. So right now it's creating a separate portal item that's pointing to that exact same service. Now, if we look at my content here, you'll see that I have both search capital cities and search capital cities labeled. So let's take a look at those two item detail pages so that we can specifically see that even though they are two separate items, they're pointing to the exact same service.
So just to recap, right, we have that one GIS service in the ArcGIS server tier, but we're going to have two web layer items, both back referencing to that GIS service.
So this was my new layer item. When I scroll down, I can see the specific URL that it's going to, and it's still search capital cities. If I go back to just the search capital cities, you'll see that again, it's that same URL. So same service, two different configurations that I can use in different applications, different maps, depending on who my end clients are. Okay, so back into Pro. One of the really cool pieces of functionality that we have in Pro is that you can share vector tile layers. So this is completely new with Pro as opposed to ArcMap. Why would you use vector tiles as opposed to raster tiles? They're a lot faster, for one thing. The process of sharing them, what would normally take maybe weeks or days to create from raster tiles, vector tiles, it's shortened down to a lot of times hours. They're really lightweight, so they scale really nicely, especially if you have viral maps where you have millions of people accessing them. They scale really nicely so people can interact with them. Again, because it's vector, you can have multiple versions of that same service. So you could potentially change the color of the roads in one so that you can use that same service with different configurations. Labels are really nice in vector tile layers because they can rotate with your data because it's not a raster cached map. Because it is vector, it doesn't support raster data, so a lot of times you'll kind of mash up between two layers to create your base maps. So to share that, I'm going to share my entire map here. So from the sharing ribbon, I'll launch the share as web pane or web layer pane. And because it's a vector tile layer, it's a tile layer, I am going to choose the option to copy all of my data. And by choosing copy all data, that gives me my tile layer option. So I'll choose vector tile. New at 1.4, we do support any projected coordinate system that you may have for vector tiles. So any coordinate system, we will either auto-suggest a tiling scheme for you, or if you have, you have a set tiling scheme that you always use, you can pull that in from an existing service or a tile layer. And I'll go ahead, you can see I'm getting one new vector tile layer item that's going to contain all of those sublayers. I'll go ahead and analyze. And again, my base map isn't supported because I can't have a service within a service, but I'll go ahead and publish that. And because I get impatient when doing demos, I already published this out so that we can take a look at it. We'll see it right here. So you can see that same New Zealand map is in here, and as you zoom in, it renders really quickly. It's really nice. So in Pro, I'm just going to show you, I've pulled it in there as well, so you can see under the source tab that that's coming from a service. And within here, I can click the V button and rotate my map. And if you notice, my labels are staying visible there. They're still billboarded for me, even though I've turned my map upside down. So that's one of the really nice things with vector tile layers. Most of you work with map image layers, map services, yes? So how do we share those from Pro? Got another map here. And here I'm pulling this data in. It's for special event planning, so I have a very special event that I am planning within this specific area. And I have different point types that I want maintained that I'm going to use in a web application later. Here, my data is already in my Oracle database, so I'm going to be able to reference my registered data. So I'll go ahead and click. Now, you'll notice my vector tile layer is still publishing. One of the nice things from Pro is that I can have multiple sharing jobs go at once. So basically, as soon as this one is done, it'll automatically start working on the next one, even though I'm clicking publish now. So that also means that if I were to close Pro while those jobs are working, that's totally fine. It'll keep processing in the background. It's really nice, especially for cache maps. So here I'm choosing this option to reference registered data. I'm going to check on the layer type feature because I want this to be editable for my end users who are actually in the field. I'm choosing to share that with everyone. And then under configuration, you'll see that because I did choose 2 layers, I have 2 layers that I can then configure, whether that's my map image layer or my feature layer. So if I were to go in here, I could potentially choose to draw this from tiles or dynamically. I can set up my dynamic workspace. Feature is going to give me my feature properties, so any editing, geometry updates, things like that. And you'll see under content, this is just your preview of what you're getting. I'm creating a map image layer and a feature layer in my portal item. What this is actually doing on the publishing side is it's creating one map service with feature access on my server. So one service, 2 web layers that are being created from it. If I had multiple federated servers, this is where I would go ahead and choose which one I want to publish to. So I'll go ahead and click publish there. And again, I'm impatient, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what that ended up creating, which is, look at that, a beautiful map service here. So I have both my map service and my feature layer in this map, even though you only see one, so I can edit. And if we zoom in here, I'm going to move this festival information kiosk outside of the YMCA. Oh, where did you go? There he is. I'm going to move this guy over into a more centrally located location. If we zoom out, you'll see that my info box there has moved. If we come back here looking at my local data, as I zoom in, you'll see that my info box has again moved. So as I made data updates to my service, it was updated in my database, complete feature access there. Oh, one thing I will also mention, when you do have multiple jobs running, we have the jobs pane to give you updates. You can see that my vector tile layer is successfully published, and it's currently uploading the service definition for that map image layer.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. Just want to make sure I switch the screen. Okay, so the rotating labels, sorry, the labels staying where they were as Melanie rotated the map, that was pretty cool, right, with vector tiles? No one's, I thought that was cool. Thank you, yes, well deserved. So just to prove to you, no smoke and mirrors, my service did publish at 120, right? You guys see that down here in the lower right-hand corner? And if I flip over, you can see that it's in my portal under capitals, okay? Now, let's go back and talk a bit more about what Melanie showed in her demo, right? These sharing data options. So when she was in ArcGIS Pro, she went to the configuration panel and she had a choice. Did she want to reference registered data? In other words, if I have source data in my map in ArcGIS Pro that's being referenced somewhere, when I publish that content, I just want to point back to the original source data. If it's not registered, that data will be copied, or I have the option to copy all the data. I can force that, right? This is that screen capture of the configuration option dialog inside ArcGIS Pro. But let's look at this in a bit more detail. What does this really mean? Oh, and by the way, if you're the end user, you have the option to choose this, but we want to explain to you what's happening under the covers if you're an ArcGIS Enterprise Administrator, so you can tell your end users what they need to do or be aware of. So if I work with registered data, when would I choose this? Well, I want to choose this if I want to support web editing workflows. For example, you can see on the concept diagram here, we have desktop, right, ArcGIS Pro, pointing to a location. It could be data in a geodatabase or data in a file folder location. And if I decide to share my content from ArcGIS Pro to ArcGIS Enterprise, so I'm going to take that data and make that GIS service inside ArcGIS Server, if I want to reference the registered data, what that means is the GIS service is actually pointing to the source data. This might be useful if you have data, let's say, for example, in an enterprise geodatabase, that authoritative data content, right? You want people in the field to edit that web service, that feature service. Inside the enterprise geodatabase, you might make a version and then publish from that version. When the people in the field make the edits and submit those edits to the feature service, they get posted in the version inside that enterprise geodatabase. The source data is not copied. Now, another workflow is this. Well, what if I have unregistered data? In other words, I have ArcGIS Pro. It's working with data in a data source, but I haven't registered it with the GIS server. What happens here? Well, here I share my content, so I create that GIS service. But what actually happens behind the scenes is that source data actually gets copied to the server. Could be the ArcGIS data store, for example. Then that GIS service will point to that copied data. And this might work for you if you don't want to do data editing, right? However, if that source data that the map in ArcGIS Pro is pointing to gets updated, will that data appear in my GIS service? Who says yes? Who says no? No, right? The rest of you don't care. That's why you didn't put your hand up. That source data doesn't get copied. But this might be useful if you want to share, as part of your GIS service, a point-in-time snapshot of your data. So it really depends on your workflow. And again, you have the option to say, no, I want to copy all the data over no matter what. And that might meet another workflow or another business requirement. So we talked about this idea of working with registered and unregistered data. Really, it's this idea of a data store for your GIS server. And this is a concept. It's an idea. A data store is basically a valid location that ArcGIS server can see, and it contains data that powers its web services. It could be a folder or a geodatabase. And this is a concept that's actually been around since the 10.1 release. And I mention this because there's another idea called the ArcGIS data store. I know we try to make it a little bit tricky, right? Similar names. One's a concept, one's a component. The ArcGIS data store was released at the 10.3 release. It's a separate standalone installation of ArcGIS Enterprise. It is what you install to set up a hosting server. But the ArcGIS data store, its only purpose in life is to support a hosting server for a portal configuration. That's not what we're talking about here. For the purposes of this technical session, and when we talk about in the context of sharing content from ArcGIS Pro to Portal or the GIS server, we're talking about the data store concept. This idea of a well-defined location to ArcGIS server that contains data that powers my web services. Now we can have two types of data stores. We can have databases or folders, and there's actually two ways to define or create a data store, if you will. The first is inside ArcGIS Server Manager, right? You go to the Site tab, you go to Data Stores, and you define or add a new data store. And I'm going to demo this for you in a minute. The second option is when you're sharing from ArcGIS Pro. So you saw earlier when Melanie and I both took our content and we wanted to share, we hit the Analyze button. The Analyze button will look at our data and it'll tell the software whether or not the data has been registered. If it has not been registered, we'll get a warning, and we could right-click on that warning and then define a data store there if I want to. So let's take a look at how to define a data store inside ArcGIS Server Manager. So you can see here I have, this is classic ArcGIS Server Manager, the administration tool, right? As a regular publisher, I probably will never interact with this. But if you're the administrator for Portal for ArcGIS or ArcGIS Server, you may want to consider doing this, setting this up for your publishers. That way they don't have to worry about it. If I want to define a new data store, I simply go to the Site tab, and it's going to load. Then I go to the Data Store sub-tab on the left, and basically here is where I can define my data stores. Notice I already have a data store called the ArcGIS Data Store for my hosting server. But let's say, for example, I have this location on my machine called C/project data, right? I'm just going to copy this location. And if I want to, I can create a new data store, a new folder that will contain data to power my web services. I give it a name, I call it project data source. I give it the folder path, I copied that C project data, and I simply give it the host name, the machine that the data store is on, and I hit create. Right? It's literally that easy. I am telling ArcGIS Server, hey, this folder at C project data is going to be a location that contains valid data to power web services. And to make sure it worked, I simply check on it, and I can hit validate. And Server says, yes, you know what? I'm aware of that location. I have read-write access, and now I can make services. Or, sorry, I can take the data inside and use it to power my services. This is a registered data store location. And with that, I think I'm going to pass it back to Melanie, and you're on 3. You're on 3.
I believe so. Okay, so those are our data stores. That's the difference between our two data options that we have in Pro. Reference register data is exactly like what you're used to in ArcMap. Copy all data is new at Pro, where we ignore your registered data sources and copy everything. Moving on to web maps. So from ArcMap, you're not able to share a web map directly. From Pro, we've added that functionality, and we have 3 main configurations available to you to allow the sharing process to be really easy, kind of a one-click experience. So depending on how you plan on using your web map, that's going to be how you determine which configuration you choose. So we have exploratory, editing, and visualization. Whether you need an interactive map that supports querying, whether you need that map to be editable, or if you need it for really fast visualization that'll create pre-generated tiles for you. Now, just like we had with the web layers, we have those same data options when you're sharing a web map. So you have the option to reference your registered data or to copy your data. Depending on which option you choose, we're going to try to create a different web layer type within that sharing process. So if you choose reference registered data for an exploratory map, we're going to try to create map image layers. If you choose copy all data for exploratory, it's going to be a copied feature layer that has editing disabled. And I promise it's all docked. I wrote it, I swear. Now, any layers that you have in your map that are not supported by that primary web layer type are not going to get dropped. They're still going to be shared. It's just going to be as the next best available option. So if you chose copy all data editing, we're trying to make an editable feature layer. But if you have raster data in your map, obviously a feature layer can't support raster data. We're going to create web tile layers instead. So we do our best to make the web layer option that you need. And that really makes that one-click sharing of new web layers really easy and accessible for your end users. When we share web maps, all map level settings, such as bookmarks and feature search, are automatically going to be maintained. So if you've set up 10 main bookmarks, you're going to see those in your web map. And then when you share that web map as an application, you're going to see them there too. So we make that really seamless for you. For more control, if you want, one layer to have a different editing capability than the others, you can split those within the sharing web layer or web map experience and configure them individually, or you can share those web layers beforehand and bring them back into your map in Pro and share that out. Because when you share web maps, we don't drop existing web layers. They're just referenced in your web map. That being said, any changes that you've made to that web layer is going to be stored in the web map, not written back to that original web layer. So if you've changed your symbology, you've changed labeling on a web feature layer in Pro, we're going to store those settings in the web map, not modify the service or web layer that you pulled in. So looking at the screenshot it's my contents pane here, and you can see that I have a local layer capitals. That's going to be published out as a new web layer. And then my base map topographic, that's just going to be referenced in. So that's not going to be republished. It'll just be referenced by the web map. So looking at that in Pro, let's see what that actually is like. So here I have a map of power outages in the Houston area. Right now you can see I'm looking at my data source that this layer is actually, so all of those yellow dots are actually a tiled layer that I've already published out. I have some local data, and then I have my base map information. Now, when I go to my Share tab, I'm going to choose Share as Web Map. That opens up the Sharing Web Map pane. I'm going to change the name here. Power outages. And then when I select a configuration, you'll see that I have the two sections, reference registered data or copy all data, with those different use cases in them. Under configuration, if I say want to split my web layer, so I want this to create two map image layers, I just select which sublayer I want to split at, click split, and then I can go into each one individually and configure individual properties. I'll go ahead and analyze. And here, just like Derek had mentioned, this is telling me that my data source is not registered with my server. I can right-click and register that if I wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and just click Share. And because we're running out of time, just like that, I already did this. So here, I can open this up in the map viewer, and you'll see that it's going to have that existing web layer, the tile layer that I had already published out, as well as the new web layer, that map image layer. Cool. Okay, and there it is. Yay, it happened. Okay. Should we go into other stuff or? Okay. Okay, so we just demoed a lot of sharing of 2D data. One of the great benefits of Pro is that we support 2D data and 3D data equally, side by side. What you can do with 2D, you can do with 3D. Sharing is the exact same. So you can share your 3D data as new web layers as well as new web scenes. The experience is exactly the same, and it's really easy to do so. In Pro specifically, we support sharing out 3D point layers, 3D objects, so your buildings, multi-patches, point cloud layers, which is what you can see in the screenshot on this slide, as well as integrated mesh, which is a combination of imagery and elevation data in one. So whether it's directly through the sharing UI or through packages, all of those are supported from Pro. As Derek mentioned at the beginning, we can also share web tools. So a web tool is just the portal item that exposes a geoprocessing service. That can be used across the platform as well as back into Pro, or you can pull it into Web App Builder, a lot of different places. And similar to how you share geoprocessing services from ArcMap, the sharing experience is really similar in Pro. You share it from a successfully ran GP tool. And so that same web map, I do have super fast last demo because I can't help it. So I have a model here that basically selects a specific layer. It takes an input area, selects addresses that are within a new hotspot of power outages, and then it creates a PDF mailer for each address, explaining to them why they may be experiencing new power outages. So I've pulled my web tool that I shared out from Pro into this application. So this is Web App Builder, if you haven't worked with it before. I'm going to zoom into a new hotspot here. And then I've added it as a widget. I'll go ahead and quickly select the area where I have a new hotspot and click Execute. Am I clicking? It's executing. I didn't click 10 times just now. I'm not impatient. So what this is going to create is it's going to give me an output that has those addresses that are in that area, as well as a downloadable zip file that has those PDFs available in them. So under my downloads, we'll see that I have my printouts that created a new PDF for each address within that selected area. And that was a super, super fast demo of how you can use a web tool. Oh, we have 2 more slides. Oh, good. Okay. You can also share locators from ArcGIS Pro. You can use those as your default geocoding service in your portal. And again, that setting is going to be pulled back in to Pro when you set your portal as active in Pro. And then we also support feature search. So if you've enabled that within Pro, it's going to be maintained when you're sharing your web map. Do you want to summarize?
All right, so we are finishing close to being on time. Hopefully you guys learned about sharing to the ArcGIS platform, right? We started off by briefly doing a quick review on the kind of conceptual architecture of the ArcGIS platform, both in terms of ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. And hopefully we emphasize that when you share from ArcGIS Pro, going to online is really easy, but when you're sharing to ArcGIS Enterprise, there are some considerations, especially for those of you who are the ArcGIS Enterprise administrators, right? We talked about the ArcGIS Pro sharing experience. For the end user, it's really easy. You can share from the ribbon or right-click on a layer or share the entire web map. We talked about the fact that you need to define those data stores so that you can those registered locations with your GIS server. So you may or may not want to copy your data over to the GIS server. It depends on your business workflows. And then briefly, Melanie talked about sharing 3D content, web tools, and also locators. You'll go one more slide. So with that, we thank you guys very much for showing up. We ask that you fill in the evaluation. We're going to open ourselves up for questions. This is getting recorded, which will be available in about a month on the Dev Summit agenda site. And if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, just give me a copy of your business card with the title on it, and we'll send it to you probably Friday or next week. Okay? Thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We really appreciate it. Questions? Go ahead. You want to?
Views in Pro? Views. Were they talking about? I was driving and did not get to see the plenary, but we can talk about it later, and I can potentially help you. Okay. Yes.
Usually a user, I get a map service.
Mm-hmm.
Use an MXC stores Symbology for sure, right? So in the Pro, how do you manage the Symbology? Is it you usually create a project and then you store your layers and then you share layers? So after you share, how do you update out the Symbology?
So you're wondering, after you share a map from Pro, how do you update Symbology after the fact?
I would say web layers.
Web layers? So sharing, yeah.
And then, you realize you want to change the color. So do you save a copy of that project, save the ArcGIS Pro project somewhere?
Yeah.
You open that project and change the color, or
So when you're sharing from Pro, because you're working with web layers, all of that symbology, everything that that you would normally kind of maintain on that within that source MXD is at the web layer. So you could update and modify that web layer Symbology and save those changes in the JSON of the portal item, and it would be maintained there. Within the web map sharing?
The question.
Yes. So if you have, can you specify different web layer types within the configuration of a web map when you're sharing? So if your data is like raster data, it's going to automatically do that for you. We are adding, right now, it's whatever that default web layer type is, it's going to share that out. That being said, I could go in and choose, so like if I chose map image layer for this second one, I can go into that configuration and choose, or actually, I would have to choose the visualization. We're adding it. We're adding it. It's coming, I promise. But right now, so yeah, that default web layer type that that configuration tries to share, it can't be changed. Anything else?
Okay, thank you guys, and enjoy your afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the conference.